Welcome to SHOWstudio.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your beautiful new book. First question is a tough question that relates to the book. So you've done coming up for 1,000 fashion shows now. What makes a great fashion show?
You're starting tough, right?
It's an easy, light question to welcome you to.
What makes a great fashion show? And do you want an easy answer, a short answer, a long answer? We have a bit of time ahead of us.
I want
quite a few. I mean, what makes a good fashion show? What makes a great fashion show? Over anything is for it to be memorable, for it to be memorable for the right reasons, because a fashion show that you remember for without knowing who it was for would be the wrong reason. And for me, what makes for a great fashion show is that it's memorable in a moving manner, that you've moved your audience, and that's why they remember it. And then what's important, that you've moved them with the elements that compose the DNA of the brand, that compose the novelty of the season and the collection. But more than anything, that you've used all the elements you can to create an emotion that will make that show memorable, and memorable for what it was for.
It's interesting, sort of on that note, Sally Singer wrote an essay within the book, and she says, this is a book about spectacles. And I wonder, do fashion shows always need to be a spectacle?
No, not at all. I think, I mean, obviously, I've been labeled for my work and the work I've done with my team for many years for doing these spectacular shows, and it's true that we enjoy doing them, and we're very generous people. We enjoy giving you a spectacle. Nevertheless, I really don't think that a show needs to be a spectacle, and in fact, very often we are asked to do sometimes a spectacle, again, for the wrong reasons, and we often decline that. A show becomes at some point spectacular, and therefore a spectacle when all elements merge to naturally create something that becomes a spectacle. But I don't think it needs to be forced. I think the origin of the fashion show, which we still remember, is simply to show clothes. The fact that we've helped them become spectacular was a way to make them not just more memorable, but also to make them visible and stand out with the quantity of fashion shows everyone is fed by all the time. And also because since I started, TV, came into the story, and then obviously the web. But basically they had to be more visual, and they had to be more interesting for a wider audience that is not a professional audience, first on TV and then onto the web in general, and now live obviously on your phone and Instagram. So for that reason, they became maybe more spectacular, but I don't always love the term. I think that what we just said before, what makes a good show is not to be spectacular, it's to be memorable. To be memorable is to have moved you in certain ways, and in ways that you'll remember for what it was for. And if you use a lot of, how do you say, bells and whistles to do that, and it works and it's appropriate, then it's brilliant. But very often it's not, and it still can be brilliant without the bells and whistles.
So simplicity can be spectacular.
I don't know if it can be spectacular. It's much harder to achieve well.
Yeah.
Simplicity can be memorable. Maybe not completely spectacular, though sometimes it has. I mean, to a certain degree. Well, no, we haven't said what spectacular means. I mean, to me, I spent over a decade, maybe 15 years, doing shows with Hussein Chalayan, for example, here in London. They were not spectacular. There was a lot of minimalism and simplicity in them, but they were very moving and memorable. And I used a lot of elements to create that language I created back then for Hussein's shows that all together became something else, something very different. But I'm not sure we could have called that spectacular. I think what we did with John Galliano for 15 years was more spectacular. So ultimately, I think spectacular is one of the adjectives we can put to many of the shows we've done, but just one of them. I don't think they all are, and I don't think they all need to be.
It's interesting that you mentioned someone like Hussein Chalayan, because I think there is this sort of accepted idea that a fashion show should be sort of optimistic and enjoyable, and that you should leave feeling good. And I think there's a sort of interesting thing with certain fashion shows that make you feel really uncomfortable. Sounds like a criticism, but I mean it in a sort of positive way. You leave feeling challenged, and you've maybe seen something that made you, you felt uncomfortable. It's quite a visceral thing. And how do you get that balance between doing shows that are...
It's a great question. It's a good point. I mean, challenge is a good word. And I think you can even extend it to not necessarily feeling bad or feeling sad or feeling down, but feeling questioned and feeling disrupted. I think, I mean, it goes back to the first thing. I think feeling something is the first and main objective for me. And I think people need, I think we're there to help them have feelings. The worst thing is a show that makes you feel nothing. And I don't actually mind if you feel not just questioned or weird, but even if you felt sad. So you're right. One would think fashion shows should be up and etc. I don't believe in formulas. I don't believe in principles or rules of any sort. And what I do believe, as I said, is that a fashion show, first of all, a fashion show is not one fashion show to me. A fashion show is the start of a story, or sometimes we arrive in the middle of the story, but a fashion show is one element of long-term, long-lasting stories, which are the making of brands and the definition of the visual identity of fashion designers. That's what a fashion show is for me. So I never actually think of a show on its own, and in fact, when I start, and I've often had the chance to start very, very early with a lot of designers at their almost very beginning. Ones like Hussein, or with Victor and Rolf, or with Rodarte, or with Anthony Vaccarello, with Jacques Mus, but even with people like Michael Kors, who's been around longer and has been doing it for very long, or and in other cases, like big houses like Dior that we've been working with for 20 years next year now. And many of these years, obviously, with John and Raf and Maria Grazia, they were stories that we took in the middle of the existence of a brand. What I was trying to say is that a fashion show is one element of a long story. And when I start at the beginning of the story, or when I just start, period, meeting the designer, what's very important for me right away is the language I can help develop that will be a thread throughout the life of the brand, throughout the life of the designer, and that will become the visual identity of the designer through his fashion shows. And in the case specifically of Hussein Chalayan, I just spoke about for a second, when we first met, I tried to, obviously like I do every time, and together with my team, dig into the personality of the designer and try to, out of that, bring all the elements and the ideas and emotions that I think should be translated through the shows. And at that moment, I don't think even of what's up or down or happy or unhappy. I couldn't actually care less. I only think of what I believe will be true to me, to do what I have to do with sincerity around what I understand of the designer, and for them to have a frame to work in that could help them be even more extremely themselves and express more of what they would express, and to push them further, to differentiate them further from, of course, everybody else, and to highlight and enhance as much as possible their inherent qualities or personalities. And that's how you get to where you get.
Yeah.
That's how I got, at least to where I got.
It's interesting that you just said this thing, you said, the worst thing is to feel numb. And hearing you talk particularly about some of sort of the early shows you did, it's quite interesting because I feel like when you started, you've talked about this before, you were doing something that was sort of the antithesis of what was happening, which was fashion shows were quite, they were simple and they were mundane and they were all quite similar. There was this set format. And I wonder to what extent you feel like we're almost sort of slightly going back to that. Like now you see so many shows where it's just like white runway, none of the girls really model, they just walk and walk back, there's no expressions. It's very, and
You're right.
People at Fashion Week often say, like all the shows are blurring into one. And
Yeah.
do you think we've sort of, the pendulum swung back a little bit?
Yes and no. I don't think that we've gone back exactly. I think in the, oh my God, in the over 25 years I've been doing that, trends always go and come back. I mean, there's been cycles and they become shorter because time goes faster. So to a certain degree, yes, we are going back. We're going back to everything, and we very often and quickly go back and back again. What I think there is today is that there is less time, less attention, and more shows. I mean, it's a given to say. So the fact that there is so many of them in so little time, for so many people and all seen live simultaneously makes them blur into one and make many of them more similar. I don't believe it's the case of all of them, and hopefully I don't do too many of those. Those meaning the ones you don't remember, or the ones that were just simply that work tool that fashion shows originally were supposed to be. But the other thing is fashion shows are not a work tool anymore. The truth of the matter is that they're not. They were the only and best way for professional buyers and fashion magazines editors to see the collections in time and early enough to shoot them and then show them to the global audience, or to buy them and put them in the store 6 months later. This we all know is over. So they're all seen live, and they're all seen live by more people than the professionals. If you have 500 to 1,000 people in a room, that represents a very, very small portion of the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, who actually see it live simultaneously. So it's no longer a professional affair, and it's no longer a work tool. So as we know them generally, sometimes people get fed up with all that too muchness around it. And yes, there are professionals who still want and need to see the clothes. And sometimes within reason, and they all feel, or some feel, that we should go back to that and just say, fuck it, let's just make a very non-spectacular, non-show kind of show, and just show the purity of what it is that we've designed. I think it's great. I think in that case it's amazing when it's done again with enough extreme and enough will so that it stands out. We call it the non-show show. I mean, I think it's what the very minimal shows started with Helmut Lang, but more than 20 years ago. They were, after the spectacles of the late 80s and the early 90s, because they started then being spectacular. He was one that once said, no, we'll call it séance de travail, and we'll just have the models walk very simply, very straight, and they became something. They weren't nothing. They were actually a lot of something. Like great minimalism is a lot when it's very well done, but it's got to be done impeccably. We have done other types of what we call non-show shows, like with The Row, for example, the Olsen sisters in New York. New York is sometimes a zoo for the wrong reasons. I mean, that's another equation of fashion shows. It becomes a zoo because of the celebrities, well, we call them bloggers, the street style photographers, and everything that surrounds fashion shows that distract you from what it's supposed to be about. Because that's another side of the spectacle that we don't necessarily control. Sometimes we want to play with it and engage with it, but whether we want to or not, in many cases, it just so happens. So with The Row, for example, we worked with Mary-Kate and Ashley for a while, proposing them to do the most non-show show and to go very deep into that very early in the morning, not a single camera in the room. The show would be shot and syndicated at 8:30 a.m. before there's an audience, and then those would be out, and there would be only 100 people. They would sit very comfortably in a very simple place with no effects of any sort. There was hardly a beginning and an end. It was just very natural and spontaneous and very luxurious in a light-handed, simple manner. And that worked really well as well. But again, I don't think that falls in what you were saying. The NUM show is just the shows that needed a little extra to be memorable, or maybe didn't need it to happen, if you're going to be very drastic about it. And the truth is there are too many fashion shows. Especially there are too many fashion shows on the same days, in the same weeks, of those same fashion weeks. That's also the part that's very tiring in a way, because of its quantity and because of how much we all see of it. So if this got looser and broken up a bit, the system of 10 shows a day for 4 continuous weeks in the 4 cities, it would be a little easier to digest, and it would help designers and people who do shows make them a little more memorable, interesting, and worth having been, probably. I'm a bit harsh, I know that. But
no, it's interesting. It's very interesting also to hear you talk about sort of how digital has changed things. And I wonder sort of, because sometimes when I attend the shows and I'm sat there and I can see these cameras recording it all, you do stop feeling like an invited guest, and you almost start feeling like you're like an extra on a movie set. Like you need to be there sat in the chair so it looks like a fashion show, but really it's not for you, it's for these people watching at home, and you're kind of there to fill that role of of viewer. And I wonder if you had a point in your career where you started to feel less like you were crafting fashion shows and more like you were crafting digital assets.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. I mean, in fact, the reason, a lot of time I ask, why did you do this book now? I mean, the book is called Betak Fashion Show Revolution. And I, without any false modesty, believe that I participated in the first fashion show revolution, which started over however many years ago that was, 25 years ago or something. Basically started when fashion shows starting to appear for a direct, non-professional audience on TV and then on the web. That was the start of that revolution that had to make it be more compact, more efficient, more media-worthy, and then more TV-genic. And we did all that. I think we did all that, and we did all that through over 1,000 shows now. The reason I decided to do the book now was because, in fact, I think it's precisely the moment when that new revolution of fashion show is starting. The social media and the technology has been there for a little while already, but it's really now, I think, that the entire world of fashion, and that in general the people interested in fashion in the world are ready for that switch, are ready for it to happen exactly at that moment. The technology has matured enough that you can effectively see as well, if not sometimes better, a fashion show by not being there. The social media has reached that point where the quantity is so massive that you have to accept it. You have to accept, as you just said, that you might sometimes feel like you're an extra and that the show is for these people, because the truth is that, yes, it is. It is mostly for these people. They've outnumbered us, or you. So it is the moment to consider that. And I believe, yes, I've started a few years ago. I think Instagram was a big detonator of this. The internet in general started, 20 years ago or something like that, when we did for Victoria's Secret the first ever webcast live show. I'm trying to remember when, sorry, in 2000, in May of 2000, so 17 and a half years ago. And that, in fact, crashed the internet for the first and only ever time of history of internet. And it was the start of fashion shows going there.
Do you blame yourself?
Not really. Yeah, I mean, yes, I do blame myself and my team, and obviously the Victoria's Secret amazing team. But more than anything, I guess I should blame the girls, really, that were on the show, not really myself. The girls on that runway are to blame. But more than blaming them, I think it's a great, interesting fact. We still talk about that, because that was one definite breaking moment, benchmark in the history of the shows. That was then. And then came, I don't know if it's 5 years ago or 4 or something like that, Instagram, which started slowly with pictures. Then it started having a 15-second max video. That was the first start of that revolution. Everyone, we tried to fit in 15 seconds a lot. I've started designing cues in fashion shows that would last less than 15 seconds.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that, and I would actually make introductions to those cues so that I would know that people would have the time to react, to take out the phone, to go into video, and then film that momentum that would be good enough in less than 15 seconds that you know they're going to post right away. And it did work. It worked exactly like that. And then it's 15 seconds increased to 30 and then to 1, and I'm not sure they even have a limit now. Well, now obviously they don't, because you can go live and you can do stories. But the technology has therefore completely affected what we do. The technology / the social media, it's not just technology, it's the way it's used. It's the fact that those media exist. And I think we're no longer just at the beginning. We're at a mature point where we have to address it and we have to accept that it's a new time. And I think the other side of the equation is the fact that in big parts, fashion shows became sometimes not just a tool where you show the clothes because you don't really need it for that. Retailers don't really see them on the runway. A lot of what they see is not going to be produced anyways, and they want to go see it on a rack before or after to buy it. A lot of these brands anyway don't wholesale, period, so they don't need retailers. And when it comes to the press, the long lead press has, of course, less importance because of the immediacy of the digital press, but also it became more than a need of them to be there to see the clothes. It became a way for the media to thank the houses and designers to advertise in the media, and the designers felt obliged to still build that room for 500 to 1,500 people to accommodate well those guests that they have to please because they will put them in those medias. And those media spend a lot of money to go to the 4 cities, to go thank their advertisers. So that equation, when things don't go great, is not really working anymore. There's a lot of money spent on both sides. Everyone's trying to thank the other.
Yeah,
exactly. And then that's when the snake bites its tail.
Make each other feel important.
Yeah, they're both making each other feel important. They're both, and it's great. I mean, and again, I'm not being negative, and I'm definitely, of course, not being nostalgic. I think that there's a reason in every creative field for media, for press, for an audience of people whose opinion not only matters more just because, no, people who are professionals of the topic, people who have an amazing culture of the topic, and people whose impression and whose opinion should matter because it can help push the creativity of that field further. That's what really critics, if we don't want to call them media, should be about. Those should always exist. Whether they write in a fashion magazine that gets printed, whether they have a blog, or whether now they can be loud vocal influencers, as we call them, doesn't matter. What matters is the quality of what comes out of all of this. And I think that every creative field needs every power needs counterpower, if we call it that. It needs a counterpower that can help push forward and that can help make creativity better. And that's valid for every creative field, and it's probably valid for every field, in fact. You need those opinion leaders that have the knowledge of it all, of that topic, to help you go further and be better with yourself. So for that reason, I think fashion press should always exist, even if we shouldn't call it fashion press anymore. There should always be specialists and critics that know very well the field and that can highlight talent when they help see it, that can highlight fraudery when they help see it, and that can help push the entire world further in every creative field and in every mean possible. So for that reason, sorry?
Do the fashion press do that?
I'm sorry?
Did the fashion press do that? I feel like...
Not really, no. But for the same reasons. No, but to a certain degree, there's a cycle, there's an economical problem here. It only survives thanks to the ones who can help them survive. So sadly, yes, I'm sorry to have to admit as well, the fashion printed press as we know it is bound to die, as we know it. I think what's happening slowly is that all these people are obviously merging, all these opinion makers, all this great knowledge. There's an amazing knowledge in that body of people that is the fashion press. That knowledge can be still followed and appreciated faster live digitally. There's nothing wrong with reading you on a screen versus a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, I personally love paper, obviously. I just did a book. Yeah. I believe in books a lot, not just because I did one, but I really, really do. I genuinely do. I believe in paper, and I also believe in the opposite of versatility and the opposite of what I do. What I do lasts less than 10 minutes. What we read quickly on our phones or on our screens lasts a few seconds as well. Books will remain, or paper will remain, but maybe not that monthly paper that has a bit of a dated information when it comes out. Maybe what goes on paper should become more like books. A few great, more underground magazines have started doing it. Collectors, basically, like Self-Service did, like Days did, like Garage did at some point. Like, if they become objects and collectors, and they are less of the moment, but a little more global, a little more, how can I say, less news orientated, then they would become beautiful things that you want to have, made by the same talents, and that you're going to keep. And press, as it's called, should become immediate, because it is immediate, and it's what's happening now. And once we all agree with that, then it's going to change completely the landscape of fashion shows, fashion weeks, and the fashion industry in general.
But I think it's interesting, because I would say that the fashion industry isn't particularly comfortable. It's meant to be this industry that is all based on the new, but actually fashion is not that comfortable with change.
Funny, huh?
But it's interesting to hear you talk about doing that stream for Victoria's Secret and the fact that it crashed the website, because you have to go back to the fact it was for Victoria's Secret. You know, it wasn't for a high fashion brand. Often,
yes, it was a non-fashion brand.
Yeah, and they're the ones who are innovating.
Absolutely. Yes, well, they were innovating also because they were, in a way, able to be given the power to do so. It was, because it's a mainstream large brand, there was more power and more means in there. And that show was insane. And in fact, we took for the first time then the show to Cannes, to the film festival. And one of the main reasons, we wanted to help glamorize it. We wanted to change the format. We proposed to make it be a once-a-year show instead of a fashion. They were doing fashion shows prior to that we, well, it sounds harsh to say that we didn't hear so much of because they were kind of buried within the fashion weeks. We proposed a once-a-year yearly only event at a different time so that there would be more attention to it because it didn't need to be buried into the other fashion shows. It was not a fashion show. But we also proposed to take it to Cannes so that the time frame would be evening in Europe, 3 p.m. in New York and lunchtime in LA. So that we kind of looked for trouble. We did calculate the fact that there was a way to get a better worldwide live audience if we're going to use the tool of a live webcast. But to come back to today and what you were saying, so to a certain degree, I think that, as I said, yes, I don't know that the press is still as critical as it needs to be, because I believe it cannot really afford on a daily basis to be as critical as it needs to be. It probably, once it reduces the cost of continuing to print, and once the industry reduces the cost of trying to please and thank the editors that come and please and thank the advertiser, the thing will become a little more like it probably used to be and should be, in any case, a little more objective and free in the sense that there'll be a bigger freedom of criticism and of speech coming from the body of the press, which may then be called something else. But I think there's a moment when, and also the other factor that's very important, the brands and the designers themselves are becoming their own media. They're becoming their biggest media. And they're becoming their own distributors and their own stores. I mean, stores they were already, but now they distribute directly. So it completely changes the balance of the entire thing. And it's going to completely change our work. I was going to say our life, maybe our life too.
Do you feel like you've ever actually got to watch a fashion show though? Because you don't ever get to see it, how people see it.
I really rarely get to see, I never get to see the ones I do. Because
exactly.
I'm usually backstage calling the show. I'm sending the models and I'm also calling the cues and all that together with my team. Usually I have Benedict or Barbara on the other end. So they see the, they're in the control booth, we call it. The control booth is usually above the photographers. So they see live the show coming at them. And they, even though I can hear everything and have monitors, they transmit to me the feeling of the room, which sometimes you have a hard time feeling back there live. I never really see ours, but I do get invited to a lot of fashion shows. I tend to go to hardly none or very, very, very little because honestly, it depresses me. It freaks me out and it scares the hell out of me.
Why?
I hate going to fashion shows.
You find that you don't like other people's shows, or you?
It's not that I don't like them. It's that I'm a sick perfectionist. So all I see is, but I don't seek for imperfections, but I unfortunately see them because it's the way I function. And I will see them in other people's shows the way I see them in mine because that's what I look for. Well, I don't look for, that's what I see. So I feel bad, in fact, for those things when they happen and when I see them, and it's not my place to go correct them. But more than even that, I think, sadly, on the sad note, it shows me the non-importance of many of the things we find important. The relativity in the fashion world, and especially in the fashion shows, of the amount of energy and time and talent and sweat and hours put into certain things by everyone in that body in the chain, of command, from of course the designer and the studio teams and the production teams and the technical teams, the amount of attention put into details that sadly no one sees is really, really depressing. But in the same time, what's reassuring is that those details are precisely what make the difference between a good and a bad show. Details, in fact, are there to not be seen. They're there to be creating altogether that that momentum, that piece of work, that creative piece that will create that emotion, that will make it memorable and make it important, hopefully in your memory forever, just because of all the details that you will have not remembered a single one of them. But what is sad when it's what you spend your life doing, and you sit there and you just look at what actually matters, which has really nothing to do with what it is that you really give a lot of energy to, then it's better to keep the idealization of what it really is, to stay in the back, and to continue designing them without really thinking of what people see or don't see.
What do you do if you really don't like the collection?
Well, first of all, it's a funny question. A good show, weirdly, doesn't really always need a good collection, first of all. And the greatest designers or houses can't always make a great collection. I mean, no one can always make a great anything. In fact, it would be very inhuman or impersonal if it was always great. If it was only always great, then one should wonder if it's really always that person. So part of it, I think, don't matter. It's not so much what I do when I don't like a collection. I don't actually, first of all, I never really ask myself, it's not really an issue. My point, I mean, I try to remain very objective. I believe that my role is not to like or dislike, nor the collection, nor the elements I will use to enhance it. Whether I myself like raw wood or fluorescent yellow or pink will never dictate whether I'll try to push to use it or not. I couldn't care less. And based on all of this, I don't really dislike anything. And in fact, I love proving myself wrong or being proven wrong. And I love loving what I've always hated. And I love liking what I normally dislike. So, and precisely fashion with the fast rhythm of it should, if anything, be nourished by those changes and should help people's creative visions and creative parts of their mind to do that. I think it's a blessing and it's a great achievement if you can convince anyone of anything they think was wrong. And that's one thing fashion does. It's one of the rare things it does really well and before and faster than anyone else. They're not the fastest with technology, they're not the fastest with change of many other things, but they are with that. So personally, I can dislike a collection, but think there's something brilliant about it that I will help enhance and help highlight. My role is really to find not so much what's likable or not, or what's even good or bad. My role, I really believe, is to find what's really unique, what's really new, not just for the world, new within the DNA and the history of the brand and designer. What's really the uniqueness of the message, will create the uniqueness of the message of that momentum. And sometimes within hundreds of garments, so within 30 to 80 looks, I'm not the stylist, so I don't style them. I will come with another creative point of view and propose within the choreography or the pacing or cueing of it to highlight certain things or moments so that you will make memorable what I believe is not necessarily the best, but the most important to be highlighted in a collection.
How does the process work then, just in terms of the briefing, and then also kind of going off what you were talking about, like at what point do you even see the collection? Like, will the designer get in touch and tell you the concept for the show, and then when do you find out, for example, about what the hair and makeup's going to look like, or who's going to open the show? Like, how does that whole process work?
First of all, they're all very different. I mean, luckily we work with designers that are all very different, thanks God. And so for the same reason, the processes are often very different. You can't really say it's the same everywhere. But basically, one thing is sure, we always start the show way before they start the collection. Some elements we need to start incredibly early, such as at least the decision of which city to show in, what day, what time. Based on that, the venues, some of them we work on for years, because we're behind the venues everywhere in the world that we wish we could have access to, and others for months. But if in any case, before we even have any idea of what the collection will be and what even we want to do, we'll start thinking of venues. And sometimes, because we've started so early, the venue itself, once chosen by the designer together with us, will influence as well the collection. Then we speak with the designers, usually right after their previous collection, which nowadays makes it very short because there are so many collections. Many of them do men and women, some of them do couture. For the ones who do couture, then we will start couture only at the end of ready to wear, which means a few weeks ago for within 2 months. Usually it used to be 6 months prior, now it goes anywhere from 6 months prior to 6 weeks, or even sometimes less. But again, that's the creative process. Some of it has been done before, otherwise it couldn't happen. So then what happens is that the designers share with us, with sometimes myself or the members of my team, the head producers of each one of the designers and the designers in our team. They share their inspirations, they share words, they share, it depends, all of them share different things. Some of them send us pictures of their inspiration boards, others we meet and we just speak, others show us their start of sketches and fabrics and colors, others on purpose want to share nothing at all and open a discussion about what the show could be or should be based on nothing, just to see where that goes. And that's very interesting too. Sometimes the process is great because it goes against the collection. Sometimes it's great because it incorporates the collection, and everything in between can be interesting depending on how you deal with it. So again, it's not really a rule, other than the fact that it's always a very short time. And obviously because fashion weeks are the way they are, well, most fashion shows are condensed in a very limited amount of time. So now for the following season, for example, which starts mid-January with men in Florence or Milan, I'm even forgetting which one is first, and goes all the way to the end of Paris at the very beginning of March, you have a little more than a month and a half, a little less than 2 months. It's a month and 3 weeks with men, couture, and ready to wear for women in New York, London, Milan, and Paris. And that for us is maybe, I don't even know how many shows, to be honest, 25, 30 shows, something like this. It's insane, and it's in less than 2 months.
Do you not worry that you're going to run out of ideas? Or even run out of
Well, first of all, I'm so not alone anymore. That's a very, very important thing. I mean, there's over 1,000 shows in there. It started when I was a kid and eventually when I was alone. But I've had the chance to grow with an amazing team, some of which have been with me for a really long time. And so we do brainstorm together. We bring in a lot of new talents. I mean, in the office there are people that have been there from over 25 years ago, like myself, to kids who just arrive and have a very fresh eye on it all, and it's great. We also do a lot still of, and continue, and will always probably continue to work with a lot of very young new designers, which come with a fresher approach to it all. And I always love to tell my team that say we have to, as often as we can, feel like it's our first show or feel like it's their first show, and feel like we're amateurs. When I started, I knew nothing, and I still believe that at least in the field of fashion shows, which is really not brain surgery, you can do great knowing nothing. And now that I know a lot, whether I like it or not, I have had to know a lot because I've been around. I often try to force myself to feel like I knew nothing, and to be as fresh and as spontaneous in a way about my approach of it. And not just that, but including with the knowledge I have, and the knowledge which basically is knowledge about how blasé in a way our audience is, because they've been there a really, really long time, by the way. I kind of spontaneously try to always break the formats, break the brief, break everything, and start from scratch every single time. And now that we are at the start of the new revolution, I think every single fashion show brief could start by the question of should we really do it? And should we really do that? And where and when and why and how? Instead of, okay, so the show is as usual on, Monday afternoon in that venue that we've been in for 10 years, in that time slot that we've been in between such and such designer. It's probably going to be those models that we've worked with, and it's going to be this and that. And no, I think from now on we need to re-question everything, and that's what's going to make it exciting again. And I think that the designers that have been here a long time are really also, in a way, bored and tired of doing the same things. And the audience that have been there for a very, very long time is definitely looking for some sort of renewal and novelty.
Surprised, yeah.
And then the new ones, the new designers, and the new members of the audience, which are not that many, should help make that happen.
Let's go back, and we've talked a lot about sort of the present, but I do want to go back to, you were talking about when you were starting out, and so you did your first show when you were 19. Do you remember the first show you ever saw?
I ever saw, not did. I'm not sure which one is the very, very first show I ever saw was probably not very memorable, but I have vague memories. I used to take pictures when I was in school, in high school. At the end of high school, I was 17, and I would work as a photographer for the first kind of undergroundish kind of magazines. In France, there was one called Actuel. That's in the very late 80s. And there was a couple in Spain called Primera Línea and La Luna de Madrid. And by chance, I fell into that. And I started taking pictures for these. And some of the pictures I took once only were fashion shows in a fashion fair, the trade fair. So there was not even a name attached to who was on that runway. I do remember weird monkey Halloweenish type of costumes, the teddy bearish kind of costumes in the shapes of monkeys. A lot of very big fluorescent earrings. And those very late 80s, but not the top ones, those kind of middle range that you end up seeing in a runway in a fair. That was one of the things, one of the first shows I saw. Then I had the chance to see a few of the Jean-Paul Gaultier fashion shows before I actually had started working for reasons I don't even remember. Actually, yes, I was assigned once to shoot his store when it first opened, and I guess invited me or whatever. So that's how I started. I started by taking pictures of not necessarily fashion at all. I was doing a reportage, but I was working a lot at night because it was also a way to go to parties and clubs. I was taking great pictures and portraits in great clubs and parties, and then selling them to these magazines while I was in school.
It's really interesting that you come from that photography background there, because I'd read you talk about this in interviews before, because I wonder if that's affected how you work today, and rather than seeing fashion shows as events, you see them visually, you see them as images, like moving images.
Well, I see both. But yeah, absolutely. I think it did a lot. And I have to say that's how I started. I've always been obsessed with pictures in the sense of with controlled and framed images. Even if they're reportage, meaning even if you haven't yourself designed the subject you're shooting, you're still selecting what it is that you shoot. You're still framing it, and you're still, in a way, controlling it to a certain degree. So that's what I started doing, and I've always done that. And I guess it is, because it has always been obsession, it's been a thread through my work. Yes, absolutely. I believe that a show was first a still image, because in fact when I started it was just a few pictures in magazines, and then it became a live image when it started getting on TV. But and a live image is still a controlled image. It's just it's live. And in fact, it's very important for me when I do a show today. And nowadays, everyone shoots. I mean, it's been a few, I don't know, many years now, but since the iPhone and since Instagram, everybody takes pictures all the time. There was a moment in history for a couple of decades, I think, when people stopped shooting. People shot a lot, like when you think of the beautiful, the travel pictures of people's lives when we were kids. I think people were taking pictures a lot. But then at some point it died. Like when film died, it died. And digital photography wasn't necessarily for everyone at first. There was a long time when people did not take pictures, and now they do everywhere. But so yes, I think it influenced a lot what I did. And I also think that now it's an absolutely obvious thing that everything we do, we need to look at through a lens onto a screen to make sure it works for the global audience. But to me, it was always the case.
And what were you like when you were a boy? Like when you were even younger? Were you creative? What were your parents like? What
was I like? God, I had a ska moment. I had a bit of a punkish moment. I had a mohawk for many years. I actually kept the mohawk for very, very long.
Wow.
It's only been, 10 years that I dropped it, maybe less. So for really, really long. I've had Vespa since I was 14, and I still have one of them that I've had since I was 18.
That's sweet.
A lot of what I was, and I think a lot of what I did, I still am. I mean, hopefully I'm still... I think there's a side of childishness that remains to certain people more than others, maybe because I've had the chance to do what I do and to be in a world where I was going to say when I'm allowed to be. I think everyone is allowed to be whatever they want, but I'm at least in a world where I can use that childishness to a certain degree. I mean, if the word is not right, then the excitement that naivety sometimes can give you. But and also I think that the manners, the obsessions I had when I was a kid, I still have. I did very, very early on design little stages for my little robots and put them in certain positions, and then I would take pictures and whatever, which is exactly the same I do today. I'm lucky to do it with amazingly beautiful looking people and talents and girls and boys and models and singers and whatnot. But it's kind of the same thing at the end, except they move the way you tell them to move. You don't need to do that. And, but I still own the robots. I still own the Vespa. What?
You're still the puppet master, really, in making everything.
Kind of in a way, I guess. I guess all those things were there already, but I was also very anal and very visual in terms of the surroundings I would create around me, even when I was a kid, and I think I still am, obviously. I've always been obsessed with, as I said before, I think with my personal vision of perfection. And I don't actually like perfection, but I'm obsessed with trying to reach it, like many people probably. But it applies into too many things in my case. But that led to something else, which is the quest of doing better whatever it is that one does. And it's probably one of the reasons I'm still doing what I do. And I still can't bear doing more than 1,000 shows and selling the next 1,000, for God's sake. It's because they can always be better. Everything can always be better, obviously. Everything and anything one does. But going deeper into the same topic often is enriching and is super satisfying because you can get better at it.
How do you have how do you balance it with having like a well-rounded life, and a personal life? Because the fashion show schedule is punishing. You're always traveling to different cities. Like for a journalist, it's hard, but you're the person actually making these shows happen. So, is that life for you?
First of all, I'm incredibly lucky, and I have been, but that I have a wife. I'm married now, and I have loves around me. That first of all, she happens to, in big parts, have to be on the same agenda than me. And not only that, but also we often tell each other, God, how lucky are we, that we are not only having to travel often, if not always, in similar places at similar times, but we are even invited, often together or not together, but we just happen to also be invited to functions and things we have to go to, that we have the chance to both be invited to for our own different reasons. That happens very little. It's true that when you socially look around you in the realms of the fashion world, there's hardly any, if not no couples whatever couples may be, of love, of family, friend, or you name it, but something really strong and deep. So it's a good question. I have that tremendous luck of having that I manage a healthy in a way, personal life, because a big part of my life is with me a lot. And I also have children that don't travel with me to all fashion weeks. Each one of them was born I have two, but they were both born during fashion weeks, one in New York and one in Paris.
So funny.
So they have birthdays that they can share with me, or rather that I can share with them during fashion weeks in where each one is. But, and I think that, I don't know about balance. I don't know that my life is balanced. I don't actually know that I'm not sure I know what the word means. What I do know is that, as I said, I'm incredibly lucky and thus therefore happy that I'm, first of all, incredibly well surrounded. I have a team of people that I love and that are the best in the world and that support me and obviously support our clients in ways that allow us all to have a great time, to do well what we do, and to have a life.
Because it's easy.
It's very hard to, but it's a very good question. It's very hard to have a great personal life in that world and to sustain it, to have it.
Totally, yeah.
It's very, very hard because that rhythm of fashion weeks and travels is insane. And then the social part of it, I mean, social, I don't know that the word is right, but the fact that there are shows or events or obligations, so many of your time in your life, if you cannot share it with people you love, it would be very hard. On the other hand, the other thing is that people speak about the frivolity of the fashion world. First of all, when you look at the first rows, when I look at the first rows of the shows I do, I think the majority of who sits on them has been there since I started and even before me. I mean, it's insane. It is not frivolous as people think. It's a world within which the powers take a bit long to grow, to get there, and they stay forever. Yes, fashion looks like a very, very young world because a lot of the faces of it are the models we see, and these are very, very young. But the real powers behind them in the magazines, in the press, in the design houses, and in the stores or in everything else that surrounds and makes that fashion world a world are not kids. They're people that been there for a very long time and took time to get there, which is quite spectacular. In fact, sometimes too long, but spectacular. So the reason I'm saying all this, to go back to the private life, is that not only are there amazing talents, period, in that world of fashion, even though many are blasé because they see too much of the same or too much of non-great things. There are amazing talents, there are also amazing people, and within those amazing people, one can make amazing friends. It's bullshit to say that it's all superficial and crap. I so disagree with this. I have amazing friends in this world, some of which have been people I love and been close to me for a very, very long time. But also because there's an intensity to that world, and because my job is, how can I say that, creativity helps having faster, deeper relationships. They are less superficial to start with. So I'm not saying that the thousands of people I've been seeing over the years are all my best friends at all. But you don't need thousands of best friends. You need a handful.
Yeah.
And if that handful manages to be in your close surroundings very often in your life, then that's a great start. Okay.
It's interesting to hear you talk about frivolity, because there's a line in the book that sort of stuck with me. It's right at the beginning, and it says, "The fashion show is a creative form of expression. It is artistry, and with its global reach and immediacy in the digital age, it is a platform to communicate attitudes about politics, sexuality, religion, and family, a place to champion causes and concerns." And I'm interested in that because it's implying, that there is this depth to the fashion show. And I wonder, do you see yourself as having a political role?
I mean, I think, well, yes, I want to say yes. Yes, at times I do. I think by definition, when what you do has a loud voice or participates in something that gets voiced loudly meaning with numbers, it gives you a responsibility, and responsibility to a certain degree should and always is political. Now the word is maybe big, but the truth is yes, in the world we live in, fashion is one of the creative mediums that has the loudest voice. I mean, centuries ago it was plastic arts, well, it no longer is. Other, you know, in the middle of the century it was Hollywood. Well, to a certain degree, I believe it no longer is. Hollywood celebrities are very big. Films are not. In fact, there's less and less films. Music, of course, is still loud, but through new channels. Well, fashion is one of those loud new voices. So when you do a fashion show, or when you help, which is my case, a designer express his creations, and within the creations there are ideas that one can deem political, then yes, you're making politics to a certain degree. And that gives you responsibility, and I think one should take it when one has it. And it may sound both pretentious and weird, but I think amongst all things, you address really serious topics. I mean, in fact, it's sadly very newsworthy lately. The image of women in society, the way they are treated and addressed. Well, one of the first things one does when you do a fashion show, when you stage a fashion show, when you direct a woman on a stage in a fashion show, is to promote a certain image of women in general. And that alone, and then same for men. And then you also address sexuality. You address all of these topics, and fashion is probably one of the most influential ways to address those topics with refinement, but with a lot of authority and with a lot of result. I think fashion should consciously know that it addresses millions of kids, and through the way that they're being addressed, it helps them open their minds. It helps cultures. I mean, that's what art used to do, and in a way, it's no longer what really art does. It's what pop culture does today, and fashion is part of that. It's part of that loud voice that kids follow in the same way that they follow singers and actors, but it's a little bit different. Singers and actors as follows as celebrities, they're role models. It gives them as well a very, very big responsibility. But fashion, weirdly, is less of a face. Yes, there are models and there are designers, but there is also just that thing, which is a fashion show. That thing gains an interest. There are millions of followers of those things. And those things, as I just said, can promote an idea or another. They can enlighten, enhance the freedom of thinking, the homosexuality, the various gendernesses, and all of that can be addressed really well and really efficiently through fashion. And for that reason, I think it is no longer just frivolous and whether about the fact that the skirt will be longer, but it's also about that.
Do you worry about the vision of femininity or the vision of women that fashion, and men, that fashion often puts across? Because I agree with you that there is this amazing platform and this reach to so many people, but still the majority of fashion shows, it's white, thin women.
Yes, I do. I do worry about that, of course. I worry about it, and of course I tend to how can I say, to address it with the role that I'm given and the authority that I have and the possibilities that I have. So you don't always have all of them. There are things that I'm completely in control of, which is what I can tell to a model before she or he goes on a catwalk, and how I think this is, again, not right or wrong, just morally right for me, but more than anything, well portraying an idea that I agree with and will believe into. And it's, of course, usually associated with ideas of self-confidence and of freedom and of respect. I mean, again, in the world we're in and the America of Trump today, and all the backwardness we're living weirdly right now, I think I grew up in a time that were much more open-minded and free-minded than today. I mean, I grew up in the 80s. The 80s were to a certain, there was a lot of negative things probably about the 80s, like there is of every time. But it was, we were, you know, the open-mindedness were growing back then. Right now it's going down, sadly. So I think we have the responsibility to continue to help the newest generations to understand the best of the values as we can. Now, when it comes to the casting of the shows and the fact that the majority of them are skinny, very young white girls, that is an issue. It's an absolute issue. It's weird. It's not a trend, and it is not a political choice. It is, how can I say, the result of the fact that fashions, and I mean the clothes, the essence of the fashions, in the past many years seemed to look better just from a plastic point of view on a skinnier, smaller body. It's very sad, and it sounds very harsh to be said like that. So then comes the fact that you stand back and you say, no, yes, it's absolutely not right to not show diversity and to not address it. But it's a tough one to fight, to be honest, with the designers and the stylists. Yes, we address it absolutely all the time. I've always fought for it. I've always, but and then again, I don't like taboos, and I don't like little political reactions. From my very beginnings, I've liked going to extremes. I have done in America, when I first moved in, shows which were right away the opposite of what everything was, because I actually moved in New York in '93. It was the start of the wave of that very small, young, white girl, skinny girl, and boy, by the way. I mean, those grungy, wavy times happened then, and they came after the 80s supermodel or the 90s, early 90s supermodel. When I started, I was like, right away kind of fuck that, but fuck all rules, and fuck all I mean, sorry for the language, but all a dictatorship of formats of any sort. And some of the very first shows I did, I remember, I think I did shows with all big, butchy black men, shows with maybe probably more, I mean, again, you're not supposed to say it like that, but more women of color, more basically black girls than white, and its opposite, and whatever extremes. And I think that part of the appropriate open-mindedness that culturally we should help everyone have is to not be too politically correct either. You need to disturb, but yes, you need to be respectful absolutely all the time when you do that. So you can address the topics, and all topics, I think, sometimes in disturbing manners, as long as there's always going to be human respect in them. And in fact, I've worked on extremes with a lot of different people. Again, I've worked a lot on nudity. It's a topic I've always felt was important to not play with, but to address. I believe that nudity can be beautiful. I'm lucky that I grew up in Europe, in France, where it's not a taboo. And I don't believe in taboos, as I just said, or at least not for that matter. So I think you can address nudity in a respectful, beautiful manner, and we did that at times. I've done it with different designers. I've done it with Hussein Chalayan, and to a certain degree, even though there was no nudity at all, my work at the time and the start of Victoria's Secret was also based on the idea of nudity, the idea of that beautiful woman that's almost nude. And one of my biggest battles with them from day one, and what I try to have installed there, I don't work with Victoria's Secret anymore since a very long time, but all those first years when I started that show, I spent a lot of hours and time working on the light and the camera angles and the two together, so that women would look always not just at their best from a physical and plastic point of view, but in the most respected manner of that form of presented nudity. Same with John Galliano. We worked on a lot of not just nudity, on all forms of religion, on color, on race, on sex, on you name it. And if it's done elegantly, with culture, with taste, and with respect, it can lead to not only, hopefully, memorable, amazing moments, but great ways to help send a message.
It's interesting just thinking about that role of the fashion show as sort of a conversation starter or a turning point. I started with a really hard question. I'm going to end with a really hard question, because I know that I shouldn't ask you, like, what's your favorite fashion show that you've ever done, firstly because it's a really boring question, but also because it's a bit like asking you to pick a favorite child. But is there a show that you've worked on, or maybe a period of shows that you worked on, that you feel particularly proud of because of their roles as turning points?
I think there are a lot. I mean, first of all, again, we didn't speak about the book much, but hopefully it makes you want to look at it and get it.
Yeah, of course.
Then, it speaks for itself. I gave the reason why I thought it was time to do the book now. Now, the other question could be, why doing a book? Well, I hope and believe that the book shows an obvious thread within and in between all the fashion shows that I worked on myself and with my team over the years. There's no chronology to the book. The book
I found that very interesting.
We split it with the support of Phaidon, who I have to say were amazing because they really let me very free about how to address that topic. We split it between what we call venues and sets and lights and performance and case study and Rodarte. And so basically about the different elements that participate in the creation of a fashion show. And then there's no chronology other than the groupings through the scenes. And hopefully you see there a recurring thread and a personal, in a way, approach to all of the topics and all of the different maybe obsessions of mine that I've put into everybody else's fashion shows. To go back to the way it shows there, because that answers a bit your question, I hope. Of course, I don't have one favorite fashion show, and it's not like asking if you have a favorite kid, because I would never do 1,000 kids. I hope no one does ever do 1,000 kids. The book, which, by the way, I'm signing the book from, I think, at 6 p.m. A bit of advertising.
Are you?
I'm signing the book tomorrow afternoon at Dover Street Market in London at 6 p.m.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm also signing it again at Dover Street Market next week on the 14th.
It is an
in New
amazing,
York.
amazing book.
But so please come so you can get it signed and you can see the book and you can understand better everything we're talking about. There are groups in the book. So I am, as I said earlier, I love digging deeper into all the things that interest me or even obsess me. I've been known a lot for lights, and I've always played with lights, and I've played with them in a very specific personal manner, and I cue them, meaning I synchronize them very, very tightly to the action, to the choreography, to the music, to the sounds, the special effects. And I have worked with that tool on many different shows, and that creates one part of the body of work which I'm quite proud of and which I really like. And of course, I think of all the shows I did at the beginning with John Galliano for him and for Dior, as well as all the shows more recently with Anthony Vaccarello, or with Rodarte, or even more recently, say with Alexander Wang or Helmut Lang this past few weeks, this past season, where all of these elements are choreographed in a manner, as we call cueing, that I'm quite happy of. So it's not really one show, it's one body of work where I use that element well. I'm also very fond of the memories of the shows I did with Ralph Simons, and we still do, at the times of Dior and all the ones with the flowers, which were amazingly memorable. I think we together pushed that element really far. And now we still work together, by luck, with, on Calvin Klein and on his own brand, and do amazing things. But I'm also very happy and reminiscent of what we do with Maria Grazia at Dior now. And it's completely different, and that's what is interesting, is the fact that it's a continuation of the same brand. We, I think, help continue bring the DNA of the brand, make sure it's understandable for what brand it is, and also highlights the novelty of the brand with the new designers. Of course, I'm thinking in London here of all the shows that I did with Hussein Chalayan, and especially at the times here, I think those were very groundbreaking. There were a time in my life, and there were a time probably in fashion show history.
Yeah. Everyone talks about that period as a...
Yeah, and it's true that it was, because it was also the start of a new period, again. It was literally, and him and Alexander McQueen, of course, were both here in London. They were completely different and so incredibly complementary and respectful of one another. And they together made what was the most interesting of fashion at that time in that place. And by doing almost the opposite, which to a certain degree is not the opposite, is in fact what's similar between both of them was the amount of personal sensibility and that harshness of each of their personal sensibilities into the way they were doing the shows. So those were very important to me, as well as all, as I said, all the Dior shows, all the or Darte shows, or the Victor and Rolf shows were quite something as well. So there's many of them. So no, I can't pick one, I'm sorry. But I'll never have more than 1,000 kids, I promise.
It's nice though that a lot of people who I interview for this series seem troubled by the state of fashion at the moment, and they're concerned about the pace and the pressure, but you seem very optimistic.
Oh, yeah, I'm actually super excited. I mean, I'll have to admit and confess, I was myself too getting a little bored by doing hundreds of shows every year and to people that see thousands of shows every year. So the fact that system is exploding or imploding, and the fact that I am still here to help implode it faster makes me very, very happy. People think you're crazy, you're shooting yourself in the shoes, in the foot. First of all, it's fine. I'll get a new pair of shoes and a new pair of foot if I need. But I'm very, very excited by the fact that we can help that revolution and explosion go faster, happen really now, and help what will be next, which doesn't have to be better or less good or whatever. It's not a judgment about what's better or not. I couldn't care less. I'm just excited that we'll create a new way of showing fashions amongst many other things, hopefully.
A fashion show revolution.
Another fashion show revolution, V2.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.